In this segment, what I'd like to show you is how to find the present value and even the future value of uneven cash flow streams. So now we are no longer looking at annuities. We are looking at streams of cash flows where it's not the same each time period. Let's see how we would do this. First of all, we've got this cash flow stream. You're going to receive $100 at the end of year one, $300 at the end of year two, another $300 at the end of year three, and then you'll actually have a cash outflow of $50 at the end of year four. So maybe this is an investment project for your company, and maybe these numbers are actually in thousands or even millions, and you're going to be receiving cash inflows in the first 3 years, and then maybe in year four, shutting the project down, you're going to have a big cash outflow. But you're wondering, how much is this project worth? I mean, how much should you spend up front, or how much should you be willing to spend in order to receive the remaining cash flows that are on the timeline? Well, it's just a present value problem. Now, there's no fancy formulas like there were for annuities. The only way to attack a problem like this is to do each cash flow one by one. Fortunately, you should know how to do that. You should know, given any one of these cash flows, what is its present value. So if you can just do that for all four and then add up the results, you'll have it. So here's how we would do it. First, we would begin with this $100 cash flow, and we would divide that by 1.10 because it's a 10% interest rate. And this is 1 year in the future that we're going to be getting it. That gives us $90.91 as the present value of just that cash flow. Okay, what about just this cash flow, just this $300 that's going to be 2 years in the future? Well, we divide that by 1.10 squared. See the exponent there? Okay, that indicates the time at which the cash flow occurs, 2 years. What about this cash flow, this $300? At the end of 3 years, we divide it by 1.10 to the third power. Okay? And then this cash flow, negative 50, we will divide it by 1.10 to the fourth power, which gives us negative $34.15. Add these four numbers up and you get 530.08, which is the present value. Okay, so how could we do this on a calculator? First of all, let me get the graphing calculator and show one very good way to do this. You could actually do these cash flows one by one. Okay, you've got the $100 first, and you'd want to divide that by 1.1. Then you would add, what's our next cash flow? We've got the $300 divided by 1.1 squared. Then we would add the present value of the next one, which is 300 divided by 1.1 to the power of 3. And then we'd need to subtract 50 divided by 1.1 to the power of 4, subtracting it because it was a negative cash flow. Hit enter and you get 530.09, I guess, if you round that off, and so that is the correct answer. You can also do the same thing on a TI BA2 Plus calculator. You could enter all of those in exactly the same sequence. I'm not going to go through that again, but I want to show you one other possibility as far as a calculator solution. Financial calculators are built to do things like these present value problems. That's one of the main things that finance students and finance professionals have to do, and so they are built to accomplish that. But it's a little bit different when you have uneven cash flows from period to period. So how do you tackle that situation? Well, the first thing you have to do is tell the calculator what the cash flows are. So to do that, you go into the cash flow registers, the CF button. Now, you're seeing one line of the registers right here, cash flow 0, and there's a whole bunch more below that. We can't show them all at once because the calculator only shows one line at a time. The first thing we should really do, though, once we're inside this cash flow worksheet, is clear it out. Any old numbers that are hanging around from old cash flow problems, we want to clear those out because we don't want them to stick around and mess us up on our current calculations. So we'll press second and then clear work. That's how we do that. Okay, second clear work. And now we're ready to begin entering these things. Okay, first of all, cash flow 0 today. There was nothing like that on the timeline. There was no cash flow that occurred at time 0, so we will just leave that alone at 0. Now that won't always be the case, all right? There will be some problems where you'll have an actual number here for cash flow 0, but for this one, no. Now we're going to press the down arrow key to take us to cash flow number 1. That's going to be 100. It's pretty simple. You type in 100, but then don't forget this, push the enter key after you put in the $100. If you don't press the enter key, it doesn't go into the memory. Push the down arrow again and you'll see F01. That stands for frequency. In other words, it's asking you how many times in a row did this cash flow occur? The answer is only once. So that's the default. We'll just leave it alone, push the down arrow, go to the next item. Cash flow 2, that's $300. So type that in, push the enter key, and then push the down arrow. Frequency of that cash flow. How many times in a row did the $300 occur? Well, actually, here it happened twice. So to save some work, I can actually just type this in as a frequency of 2, telling the calculator it occurred twice in a row. Push the enter key and move on to the next item. Okay, we've already taken care of both these cash flows. Now we're down to the last one, which is negative 50. So type in 50 with a negative sign, hit enter, and at this point you're done entering cash flows. We're almost ready to get the present value. So how do you do that? Press the NPV button, which stands for net present value. The first thing you're going to have to put in, though, is the interest rate. After all, you can't calculate a present value without knowing what the interest rate is. So type that in as 10%, which is what it was in this problem, and press enter. Notice that we're typing this in percentage form, not in decimal form, even though if we had been using an equation, then we would have used decimal form, as in 0.1. But this is the correct form here. Push the down arrow key one last time, and now you're ready to compute the net present value. Press the compute button to make that happen. No surprise, you get $530.09, which is the answer that we had previously. Okay, is there a way to do this on the graphing calculator? The answer is yes, although you'll have to follow the instructions carefully. Obviously, one way you could do it is just cash flow by cash flow. There's nothing wrong with that approach, and in fact it's a good idea because it keeps you on track as far as the mathematics of what's going on. But there is a built-in NPV function on the graphing calculator, just like there is on a TI BA2 Plus. So how do you access this? You go to the Apps menu, you go into Finance, and then along the menu you're going to select option number 7, which is NPV. Okay, so we'll select that option either by typing 7, or you can actually move the cursor down to 7 and press enter. Either way is fine. Now the NPV function opens up on the screen, and it doesn't give you much guidance as to how to proceed. Well, here is your guidance. Here's what to do. The first thing you've got to do is type in the NPV interest rate in percentage format. So we actually type it in as 10 followed by a comma to separate it from the next thing. Okay, what's the next thing? You put in the initial cash flow. Remember cash flow 0? Well, cash flow 0 is 0 in this case. So you type that in followed by a comma. Then, interestingly enough, you type in the rest of the cash flows enclosed in a set of curly braces. Curly braces, how does that go? You push the second key and then this left parenthesis button, but if you've used the second key, it'll give you a left curly brace. And then you type the rest of them in sequentially, 100, 300, 300, negative 50. Then you close out the curly braces, close out parentheses, and you've got it. You get the answer just the same as you would have otherwise. 530.09. Okay? Now here's a question that is not addressed on the slide but is still important. How do you find future value? Well, remember our future value formula? Let's go back to it. The future value equals the present value times 1 plus I to the n power. So you've got the present value of the cash flow stream. You can just multiply it by 1 plus I to the n. That certainly is a valid way to do it. So in this case, I could take that value times 1.1 to the power of 4 and get $776.10 for my future value. I could do something similar on the TI BA2 Plus. I could take this value times 1.1 to the power of 4 and get $776.10. Now I will show you one thing on the TI BA2 Plus. If you happen to have the professional edition of the calculator like you're seeing here, which kind of has a silver looking face, this other step won't work if you have a student version. If you have the more basic version of the calculator, you'll have to just multiply by 1.1 to the power of 4, kind of like we did here. But if you have this professional edition and you've just calculated the NPV, you can actually push the down arrow key one more time and look what you've got here. NFV for net future value. You can go here, hit the compute button, and it'll be calculated automatically for you, which is pretty handy.